Hi, and welcome back to another video at Life Science Learning Hub, where we make life science simple, clear, and achievable. Please don't forget to have a look at our resources on Teacher from Snapify. You can either click on the link on the description box or you can go to the website and search Life Science Learning Hub. Today we're going to look at some questions focusing on blood groups, but before we do so, I want us to quickly watch this video so we can recap some important concepts that we need to understand first.
Imagine a hospital room. A mother has type A blood and the father has type B, but the nurse hands them a baby with type O blood. Is this a medical mix-up, or is there a biological explanation for this result? To find out, we have to look at the ABO gene. Think of a gene as an instruction manual. In this case, it gives your red blood cells instructions on how to build specific identification tags for their outer surface. This chart breaks down the genetics of blood types. Most genes give you two options, but the human population actually carries three different versions of this manual, called alleles. We label them IA, IB, and a lowercase I. If we slide over to the table in the middle, you can see how mixing and matching those three alleles creates four distinct physical outcomes, or phenotypes: type AB, type A, type B, and type O. The fact that three alleles can produce four different blood types suggests that what we see on the surface might not be the only thing written in our genetic manuals. Even though there are three alleles available in the human population, every individual inherits exactly two. You receive one manual from your mother and one from your father. This graphic shows how different alleles interact. In the blue panel on the right, we see two different dominant alleles expressed together. Because neither one masks the other, the traits appear in patches, a pattern called codominance. We see this rule in blood types as well. This box shows that when the IA and IB alleles are paired, both tags are built on the cell, resulting in type AB blood. However, if the lowercase I allele is present, the rules of complete dominance take over. The IA and IB alleles mask the presence of the recessive I allele, which is only expressed if no dominant alleles are present. This means a person's visible blood phenotype can hide a silent recessive allele. When this happens, that person is a carrier for a blood type they don't physically show. Let's look back at the mother. She has type A blood, but we don't know if she has two dominant A alleles or if she is a carrier for the recessive I allele. To find the answer, we look one generation higher. Her father, the baby's grandpa, has type O blood, while grandma has type AB. Because grandpa has type O blood, his genotype is certain. He must possess two recessive I alleles to have that phenotype. Since grandpa only has recessive alleles to give, mom had to receive her dominant A from grandma and a recessive I from grandpa. This confirms her genotype is IAI. By applying this same deduction to the father's family, we find that he is also a carrier with the genotype IBI. Now we can predict the outcome for their child. Look at the green panel in this chart. During meiosis, a parent's two alleles separate, so that each gamete, or sex cell, receives only one. When the mother's genotype splits, she will pass on either a dominant A allele or a recessive I allele. The father's sperm cells will carry either a dominant B or a recessive I. We can map these possibilities using a Punnett square. Pause the video here, draw a 2x2 grid, and calculate all four potential combinations for their offspring. If the mother donates her dominant A allele, the child will have either type AB or type A blood. But if she donates her recessive I allele, we see other possibilities. In the bottom right cell, both parents have donated their recessive alleles. Two recessive I alleles result in type O blood. There is a 25% probability for this couple to have a type O blood child, confirming the hospital results were accurate. This bottom banner summarizes the requirement. For a baby to have type O blood, they must receive an I allele from both parents. Understanding how these alleles interact explains why these different phenotypes are possible. Solving for inheritance requires looking past the visible phenotype to identify the genotypes hidden within. Once those manuals are identified, the possibilities for the next generation imagine.
Okay, so now that we've done some recap, I just want to quickly point out a few things. These summaries can be found on our teacher resources on Staffify. You can print them, stick them up on your wall, use them as summaries, and then you'll be able to do really well in your exam at the end of the year. One thing I want to bring your attention to with the recipe for genetic crosses, please make sure that you include labels. Even if you have no idea what's going on with your cross, include the labels P1 and F1, as well as meiosis and fertilization, because then you'll at least get 2 out of the 6 marks, and 2 out of 6 is better than 0 out of 6. For the blood type summary, also available on Teacher resources, I want to draw your attention to the little box at the bottom where it dictates the different combinations that result in a baby with type O blood. Love to ask this question in exams. Another one is the little box in the right corner, which speaks about the different types of dominance in blood groups. Also, something that they love to ask in exams. So, have a look at this resource as well. It's about 12 Rand on Teacher resources. I'll pop the link in the description box. And last but not least, we've got types of dominance. And the one thing I think I want to draw your attention to here is the fact that a hint that you can look for is if it's a capital letter and a small letter, then it's complete dominance. But if it's two capital letters, then you know it's either incomplete dominance or co-dominance. With incomplete dominance, they kind of meet in the middle and they say, okay, cool, we've been fighting for the spotlight, let's just make a mixture. But with co-dominance, they kind of also meet in the middle, but they say, let's not make a mixture, let's just both show up at the same time. And that's the difference. Okay, so let's have a look at the first question, which are two multiple choice questions. The question says the genotype for an individual with blood group A is. Now, before we even look at the options, let's remind ourselves of something important. Blood groups are controlled by 3 alleles, IA, IB, and small I. Now remember, IA and IB are dominant over small I. So if somebody has blood group A, it means that the A allele is being physically expressed. But there are actually two possible genotypes that can produce blood group A. The first possibility is IA. IA, that is a homozygous dominant. The second possibility is IA, small I, that is a heterozygous genotype. Now, let's look at the options. Option A says IA only. That cannot be correct because a genotype must have two alleles. Option B says IA, I or II. Now, small I, would produce blood group O, so that option is incorrect. Option C says IA only, IA, small I only, which again is incomplete genotype. And then option D says IA or IA small I. And that is the correct option because both of those genotypes produce blood group A. Now, let's talk about what the examiner is actually testing here. The examiner wants to see whether learners understand the difference between genotype and phenotype. A phenotype is what we physically observe. And in this case, blood group blood group A, is the phenotype that's being physically expressed. But a phenotype can sometimes come from more than one genotype. And that's exactly what's happening here. We've got to choose the option that shows both possibilities, both genotype possibilities. Okay. Now, question 1.7 says 4 different phenotypes are possible in the F1 generation if the parents' blood groups are. Now, this question is testing whether you understand which parental combinations create the most variation in offspring. The memorandum says that the correct answer is B, which is blood group A and blood group B. Now, let's unpack why. If one parent has blood group A, their genotype could either be IAIA, IA small I. If the other parent has blood group B, their genotype could either be IB or IB small I. Now, the only way to produce all 4 blood groups is if both parents are heterozygous, meaning they've got 2 different alleles, which means we would cross IA small I with IB small I. Okay. If you think of the gametes that can be produced, it will be IA or small I. The gametes produced for parent B will be IB or small I. And when you combine those in a Punnett square, then you'll see that it gives you the most variation. Okay. Okay, let's move on to question 2. This question is still focusing on blood groups, but now the examiner is testing whether you actually understand inheritance and how blood groups are passed down. So let's first read through the scenario. A baby was kidnapped from a hospital immediately after she was born. 15 years later, it was discovered that Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, who were raising her, were not her biological parents. Mr. and Mrs. George, whose baby was born around the same time, claimed that she was their child. Now, immediately, this question is trying to test whether we can use blood groups to determine whether the child could possibly belong to Mr. and Mrs. George. Now, before we even answer the questions, let's quickly remind ourselves of the blood group alleles. We have IA, IB, and small I. Okay, remember IA and IB are codominant and both are dominant over small I. The first question says how many genes control the inheritance of blood groups? Now, this is where many learners get confused because they see 3 alleles and immediately think the answer is 3. But remember, the question asks for genes, not alleles. There's only one gene controlling blood group, but there are 3 different alleles for that one gene. And that's why the memorandum awards 1 mark for the answer 1. Question 3.2.2 says name the individual whose blood group shows codominance. And remember what codominance means. It means that both alleles are expressed at the same time. Neither allele masks the other. And based off the summary we looked at earlier, we know that the blood group that is responsible for codominance is AB, which means the answer here is Mrs. Thomas. Okay. If you look at the last question, this is where learners usually lose marks because they don't really explain properly. And remember, this question has the verb explain. Explain why Mr. and Mrs. George could possibly be the parents of this child. And remember, on our summary, we had the little block at the bottom that explained what possibilities could result in a baby with type O blood. And that's exactly the scenario we have to apply here. If the child has blood group O, which is the scenario here, that means that the child has the genotype small I, small I. Now, for the child to have small I, both of the parents have to be heterozygous so that each can give the child a small I. That's exactly what we looked at when we looked at the video. That's why I wanted to do a little brief recap before we touch on the questions. Okay, we're moving on to the last question that I will be explaining. Question 4, you will try on your own and then check the memorandum against your answers to see if you've learned something from these specific notes. Now, this question combines a few different concepts together. It combines blood groups, types of dominance, and genetic classes. Do you see there's like a pattern across how questions get asked? So yeah, let's look at what these questions are looking for in terms of the memo. The first question says, let's quickly read. A man with blood group AB and a woman who is heterozygous for blood group B plan to have children. The first question says, how many alleles control the inheritance of blood groups? Do you see? Now they're asking for alleles, not genes, so we know that the answer here is 3. The next question says, describe the type of dominance that occurs in the inheritance of blood group B in the woman. Now, focus on what it says. A man with blood group AB and a woman who is heterozygous for blood group B. Heterozygous for blood group B. Now, if you think back to our summary, it had a little block, and on the block it said that there's 2 options for types of dominance, either complete dominance or codominance. And we know that the codominant option is blood group AB, and this woman is blood group B, so the codominant option doesn't apply here, which means it has to be complete dominance. And the reason for that is that the allele for blood group B, meaning IB, is dominant over the recessive allele small I. So definitely it will be complete dominance. So do you see, you've got 3 marks here, 1 mark for complete dominance, 1 mark for saying IB is dominant, and small I is recessive. Then the last question looks at a genetic cross, and it asks you to show all the possible genotypes and phenotypes of their children. Okay, so you have to remember now the recipe for genetic crosses. And remember, I said to you, even if you have no idea what's going on, at least include the labels, okay? Because you will get a mark for writing P1 and F1. Those two detect 1 mark. And you also get a mark if you write the labels meiosis and fertilization. All right. Okay, so we've got a man with blood group AB and a heterozygous woman for blood group B. So already we've kind of got to now determine what their alleles are, but we know this for blood group AB, it's IAAB, and for blood group B, because it's the heterozygous condition, it's IB small I. Okay, I then do my Punnett square, I cross it, and then I look at the possible options. Now, if you look at it, the first possible option is blood group AB. The second option is blood group B. The third option is blood group A. And the fourth option is blood group B. So that means if I just give the options for the genotypes, I would list the different genotypes that I come across. And if it asks for phenotypes, I will list the phenotypes that I come across. So A, B, A, and B. There's no option O here. All right. Okay. And then this is the last question. I want you to go ahead and try it. See if you kind of see a pattern. Same type of questions, right? Just asked in different scenarios, asked in different ways, but always comes back to the same set of information. Good luck, grade 12s. And don't forget to like and subscribe.